I'd like to apologise for running so late, but we've all got a lot to say, and it's quite pleasant anyway. Thank you for getting back so quickly. I'd now like to introduce you to Professor Roy Green, who, to those who are not in the policy arena, would know is one of Australia's leading innovation and industry policy academics, and has so many hats. You could probably fill my hat stand with him in all the different things he does across the Australian landscape. So, Professor Green, if you would join us and give us your views of the world.
Thanks, Lynette. And I think, given the timing, my talk is pretty much over as well. And maybe it's quite easy to answer that question. Yes, we can. But that's our role really at the Advanced Robotics and Manufacturing Hub, and I can see also among the new and established battery manufacturers and storage specialists here today. There is a bright future for manufacturing, but I think we all need to be realistic as well and recognise the headwinds because manufacturing is now down to 6% of GDP. We have the lowest self-sufficiency in manufacturing of any country in the OECD. It was around 30%, 1960s and 70s, but of course we went through a major reform process, major transition with tariff reductions in the 1980s and 90s. The value of protection had run into serious diminishing returns in the lack of innovation occurring within our economy, and the time had come for a repositioning into global markets, and many new start manufacturers took advantage of that opportunity in the 1990s, but unfortunately they ran into the big headwinds I'm going to talk about with the commodity boom in the 2010s, when Australia's national income went up per head by around 15% over a 6-year period, but we saw much of our manufacturing, all of those interesting SMEs that were starting to enter global markets became uncompetitive. We were in the middle of a really important transition which was going on around the world, from large-scale mass production, vertically integrated industries to smaller scale, more specialised SMEs. Some of which are still around today. Obviously, Varley's that Jeff talked about earlier. Many companies like that which are still on the global frontier, but we've lost many as well. And this is the process that we're starting now in the battery space of reindustrialisation. If we think about the value chain there, we produce 50% of the world's lithium. We export 90%. But we capture only 0.53% of its value. We're going to need 40 times the amount of lithium globally than we're producing at the moment. So there's huge opportunities, of course, for us in exporting unprocessed raw materials. Many would argue, well, that's our comparative advantage and we should stick to it. But if we do that, we're going to compromise our ability to develop knowledge-based industries, knowledge-based goods and services, which are the largest and fastest growing segment of world markets. And should we not be able to rely on those unprocessed raw materials in the future, iron ore, coal, obviously, with fossil fuels, even lithium and some of the critical minerals, because they don't add as much value to our economy as knowledge-based industries, we do need something to take their place so that we can import all the consumer goods that we rely on. So we produce 50% of the world's lithium, we export 90% of it, mainly to China, and we capture 0.53% of its final value, 0.53%. We can do better than that, and we need to. This is a graph that's produced in the intergenerational report. It's updated every couple of years by Treasury, and it tracks where we're going with productivity as a country. And of course, manufacturing and innovation is key to productivity. What it shows, if you look at the bars on the left with the 1990s, we were above OECD average productivity growth during that period as part of the reform programs going on within the Australian economy and the transition, as I said, from those large-scale manufacturers to SMEs that were going somewhere. And then something happened, as you can see, in the 2000s with the iron ore boom and the fact that behind the increase in our national income, we see a structural deterioration of our productivity performance because our national income was being driven by the terms of trade effect of higher commodity prices. We didn't actually have to do anything, we just collected higher commodity prices for what we were selling abroad. That hasn't stopped. We still see some commodity price spikes going on, but the terms of trade effect has almost disappeared, as you can see, as we go into the 2010s and 20s. And whereas the intergenerational report last time was projecting that we needed 1.5% productivity growth to maintain our living standards in this country, we're now below 1%, and the IGR Treasury are hoping that we can get up somewhere near 1.2%. But the point about the intergenerational report is that it can't provide the levers and the mechanisms by which that can take place. All we know is that those mechanisms have to be driven by research and innovation. That's the key driver of productivity, and it tells us that we have a long way to go, because what we see here is a decline in the growth and expenditure on R&D by business and government. And what's driving the growth in R&D at the present time? Higher education spending. And where is that coming from? International student fee income. We must be the only country in the world whose R&D expenditure growth is relying on a steady influx of international students. Clearly, that's unsustainable in the long term. It's also bordering immoral that we're bringing in international students, paying high fees and not putting the money into the quality of our educational output. We're transferring it into absolutely necessary R&D, but it's R&D that should be funded elsewhere in the economy. In other countries, much more largely funded by government and business. So we have an issue there, and it's an issue that relates to the very narrow and outdated trade and industrial structure that we experience as a country. This is the Harvard Atlas of Economic Complexity. A lot of people are quite familiar with that now. It measures the diversity and research intensity of our export mix. And this is the Australian table. You can look it up. It's all on the web. Some people take issue with the methodology, but we just have to be clear, it doesn't measure economic sophistication across the entire economy. It's just focused on the export mix, which of course is fundamental to our future living standards. And we see the incredible emphasis there on coal and iron ore. And down in the bottom right-hand corner are the value-adding manufacturing industries and subsectors. It's a very small proportion, as you can see, of what we do in this country. We're down to number 93 now in an index of 133 countries, somewhere between Uganda and Pakistan. It's not going to be a bright future for us if we are unable to broaden our export mix and in particular develop the manufacturing component of that. We compare ourselves perhaps with other countries like Germany, where you can see the brown bit, which was the natural resources, the export of raw materials piece of the Australian graph sort of relegated into the bottom right-hand corner there, and the largest part is around manufacturing industry, particularly for the Germans, cars, and of course their car industry is going to be to some extent challenged by Chinese proficiency in battery making and EVs, but that's where they have laid their strategic bets. Our strategic bets have yet to be laid. And we might even look at Canada, because obviously we're not going to be another Germany, but even Canada, with its emphasis on raw materials, still has a strong emphasis on manufacturing, and it's now number 41 in that index. We're number 93. New Zealand and Korea and other countries, even Vietnam, have soared ahead of us in that global index. And we have to wonder if we are to make a transformation in our economy, how do we do it? By increasing our productivity through research and innovation. What we see in terms of our R&D at the moment is that we're down to 1.68% of GDP, down from about 2.2% 12 years ago. The OECD average is around 3%, and countries like Korea and the ones at the top of this table are spending, Israel, Switzerland, spending 4 to 5% of their GDP on R&D. They see this as the driver of industrial transformation and the development of industries and technologies of the future. Higher education is an important part of that as well, and we do have immense talent in this country, and we saw that with some of the presentations this morning. But the point is, how do we translate that into these industries of the future? This is not going to happen on its own. It will require a national industrial policy. We haven't really had a coherent national industrial policy since the 1980s and 90s with the Button plans. This current federal Labor government is talking now about how to pull a national industrial policy together. Much of the heavy lifting is going on at the state level. Certainly Queensland has an impressive industrial policy of its own, but we can't just do this at a state level. We have a very fragmented research and innovation system in this country. All our research and innovation spending at the Commonwealth level is spread across 13 different government departments, 150 different budget line items, very few of which connect with each other. And then we also have the duplication occurring and fragmentation occurring with the states in our federal system. We do need a number of ingredients to make an industrial policy work, and let me just conclude by going through some of them. The first is we do need a coordinated approach at national level. We need to have a foresighting strategy to understand which are the areas of the global economy, which are the areas of global markets and value chains in which we can play and get our competitive advantage. Battery making may be one of them. The battery strategy nationally suggests that we'll be needing 387 gigawatts of storage by 2030. There are various estimates of what battery manufacturing would add to our economy, varying in a number of studies between $8 billion and $16 billion, with potential growth of 60,000 jobs in that area. And that's being agnostic about the types of technology we adopt, whether it's lithium or solid state or graphene. But what we find is that battery manufacturing does fit into a number of areas of priority in that we can call them national missions or priorities within the National Reconstruction Fund. It has 6 fundamental priorities, 4 of which battery manufacturers can leverage as this National Reconstruction Fund and its associated program, the Industry Growth Program, come into operation. Those are the categories, and each of them is allocated a number of billion out of the $15 billion envelope. Renewable technologies, value adding to resources, obviously to lithium. How far do we go up the value chain? As I said, we're only capturing 0.53% of the value of the lithium to our economy. Critical technologies, and the government has published a critical technologies list, and advanced manufacturing. So these are tremendous opportunities for us and manufacturers in particular to seek co-investment. The National Reconstruction Fund is not a grant fund, it's a co-investment fund, so the eligibility criteria, the investment mandate is still to be published, but it does provide that opportunity with the Industry Growth Program, which is a grant funding program, being the pipeline for SMEs to build those capabilities that will enable them to be eligible for the National Reconstruction Fund. Much more needs to be done in terms of our research and technology development focus in government. As I said, the R&D has dropped to 1.68%, with the universities doing much of the heavy lifting there. Government has not yet committed to a mechanism to grow R&D from business and from government. It's enabled us to provide a framework for those mechanisms, but the R&D funding isn't that yet there. The only real commitment at the moment at the government level, federal government, is to 3% of our GDP, but I think we can classify that as an aspiration rather than necessarily a target, certainly not in this current budget that the government is preparing. But we do have individual programs that are going to be helpful to the growth of at least the battery manufacturing sector, including the Powering Australia Industry Growth Centre. Queensland has made a submission to that. A number of universities, Hub plus Queensland Government are in the race to set this up in Queensland. It will be a national growth centre, so if Queensland is the focus of it, it will be with a national reach, but we won't hear about that for a little while to come. Public procurement is a vital lever for growing R&D. In some other countries, they have mechanisms like the US SBIR program, a Small Business Innovation Research Fund, which sets aside a percentage of funding from government departments to support R&D in SMEs and grow local capability. We don't have anything quite like that, certainly not on that scale, but the Made in Australia office, the whole Buying Australia program, the Rewiring Australia program, all are committed to growing local manufacturing and R&D in the clean energy transition, because that's the big challenge that we now face. How do we make the clean energy transition central to our industrial policy? The growth of place-based innovation ecosystems is something we're also seeing occurring around the world. Some of the more prominent ones are the Fraunhofer Institutes in Germany, the Catapult Network in the UK, and a similar program in Norway. Norway, by the way, which is also a resource exporter, but has made much better use of its tax system to ensure that it can grow its R&D base. It has not a 20% or 30%, but 76% resource rent tax on its oil and gas reserves, which it's used to fund the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. That's something we could have done a few years ago. The time hasn't completely passed, but we have missed that opportunity earlier on to provide the funding for this R&D challenge that we currently face. But place-based ecosystems have also been central to the Biden initiatives. There's a lot more publicity around the subsidies to hydrogen and clean energy production. But one of the elements of the Biden administration's program is the creation of the National Science Foundation regional innovation engines and also the regional technology hubs. This is the sort of thing that the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Hub here in Queensland is aspiring to do, and there are a number of similar types of operations around Australia, the Tech Lab and the AMRF in New South Wales, Tonsley Innovation Precinct in South Australia, and a number of others. We're looking forward to the federal government tying those together into a national network if it can be done. But in the meantime, we do have the commitment by federal and state here in Queensland to the battery manufacturing precinct and to further skills and capability building. That's something we heard quite a lot about in the employment white paper yesterday, published by the Treasurer. We do know that, for example, we're short of 50,000 engineers and we only produce 13,000 a year out of Australia's universities. We're way short of apprentices. Jeff mentioned to me earlier, Varley's company that he operates in Newcastle has vacancies for 115 apprentices. So apprentices or engineers? We do need to power up TAFE and our vocational education and training system in conjunction with universities to create those integrated pathways for the skills that are needed to meet Australia's energy transition and economic diversification challenge. So those are some of the policy issues. I won't elaborate any further. I think what the point I've wanted to make is that we do have enormous opportunities, we have great talent, but the research translation process and the building of scale for global markets and value chains still lies ahead of us in manufacturing. We're starting from a very low base, but the combination of good policy at the federal and state levels will be key to that future transformation that we're all looking forward to. Thank you very much.